This episode of the Education Matters podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Mental Health Summit, taking place from April 10th to the 12th at the Banff Center in Banff, Alberta. We're diving into important conversations at the intersection of education and mental well-being. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri, and for this special episode, I'm joined by guest host, Dr. Gina Cherkowski. Together, we'll explore how education can support mental health and empower learners in meaningful ways. So let's get started.
And so for me, it's like I waited for death to stare at me dead in the face to really go, wow, like if this is all we got to make it count. And I think we wait until it gets to that point where you're like, oh man, like Tim McGraw writes the song, like live like you're dying. And I think we just think that there's going to be more time. I think that, we'll get to it one day, someday.
We talk a lot about resilience, about pushing through challenges, finding strength in adversity, and turning pain into purpose. But what does that actually look like in practice? And more importantly, what happens when life hands you something so devastating that the usual motivational sound bites simply don't apply? Today's guest, Jessica Janzen, doesn't just talk about resilience, she lives it. As you'll hear, she is a force of energy, passion, and joy. She is a speaker, coach, author, and entrepreneur who has made it her mission to help others navigate life's hardest moments with courage and authenticity. She is also the co-founder of the Love of Lewiston Foundation, a nonprofit she and her husband created in the honor of their son Lewiston, who passed away from spinal muscular atrophy at just 6 months old. In the years since, Jessica has transformed her grief into action, raising over $3 million to support families affected by SMA, while also spreading a message that is as bold as it is necessary. Joy is hard work, but it's worth it. Jessica's own story is multifaceted. She's not a professional educator, but she has a remarkable ability to take complex mental challenges, along with the experience of neurodivergent individuals, and translate them for a broader audience. As you'll hear, Jessica knows firsthand what it's like to not fit the mold. Yet, she has built a very successful career on her own terms. Whether she's coaching clients, delivering keynote speeches, or writing books, she's proof that there is no one right way to succeed. In today's conversation, we talk about what schools often get wrong about neurodiversity and mental health, why movement, joy, and emotional regulation should be at the center of education, and how small shifts in mindset can change everything. We also discuss what it means to truly take care of yourself, why so many leaders burn out, and how to build resilience without losing yourself in the process. If you've ever wondered what it takes to show up fully in your own life, to rise after the hardest falls, to find purpose in the midst of uncertainty, and how we can continue to build all this in our students, this episode's for you. I'm Jason Buccheri. This is the Education Matters podcast, so let's dive in. Gina Cherkowski and Jessica Janzen, welcome to the Education Matters podcast. Gina, let's start with you. Where does this podcast find you today?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta, where it's snowing again. We had sun last week and it was beautiful, and now it's turning on us again.
Excellent. And Jessica, yourself?
I'm the same as Miss Gina. I was like, Yahoo! We're here from the city of the greatest outdoor show on earth. So from Calgary, Alberta. And it's not
Awesome.
snowing yet at my house, but I know I'm not that far from Gina. And so if it's there, it's going to be here very soon.
Well, can you two confirm or deny this for me? I've heard that Calgary gets the most sunlight out of any Canadian city. Is that true?
You bet.
But lots of snow and lots of cold.
Not that much snow. It melts because we had a beautiful Chinook. Honestly, best spot
nice.
in the world to live. The best people, the best community. I love Calgary.
Well, we'll talk about hockey teams, the best hockey teams on another day. But, well, Jessica, thank you for joining us on this podcast. And we're certainly going to talk a little bit about the Mental Health Summit and some of your work. But at this point, I would have given you a proper introduction. But can you update the audience as to what you're up to these days?
I'm like, Jason, that's a fully loaded question. I was like, do you want to talk about a specific time of day? I think which is the best way to explain it is like a serial entrepreneur and like just like a mom who is navigating, juggling, and pursuing her dreams. I do a lot of different things, and that's one thing I'm so grateful for. And I think we'll dive into it, but the more I've learned about my personal, how I'm wired and my blueprint, the more I understand that this is why I've developed a life like this. And lots of people are like, you can't do all that. That's not possible. And I'm living proof that you can. And there's not a cookie cutter approach for everybody. And so I'm a full-time motivational keynote speaker. I coach clients specifically on mindset and some business consulting. And then as well, I wrote a book. This is my second book. I did a chapter in a book, and then I wrote my first full book on my own. I'm working on my, what you can call it, second or third. And then my husband and I also co-founded a charity called Love for Lewiston in honor of our son, Lewiston, who passed away from a rare genetic disease. And so we also run our charity foundation, which raises money for Alberta Children's Hospital, as well as those living with spinal muscular atrophy coast to coast here in Canada. And so helping them access critical medical equipment, physiotherapy, and kind of those needs for accessibility. And so sometimes I'm a mom, sometimes I'm scrubbing a toilet. Sometimes my house cleaner, I got someone to come clean my house. So then I'm not doing that, and I'm planning an event, or I'm driving to a keynote. And so no day is ever the same, and it's always very full and a lot of fun. I'm really grateful. Yesterday I was working on accounting and like my year-end taxes stuff. I mean, it was not the funnest of days, but we still made it fun.
Well, that's certainly a full plate. And you mentioned understanding your blueprint, and that's actually something we do on the podcast. I'm very interested in origin stories and understanding how folks became the people they are and what led them to the kind of life they're living. So can you describe for the audience, where and when did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'll bring you back to 1984. I'm turning 41 this year, which is kind of wild and crazy. So I grew up on a farm just west of Winnipeg. My mom and dad are first generation farmers. My grandfather was a farmer, but sold the farm and went and did missionary work. And so my dad started from scratch in 78 and kind of, rented land and slowly has built up a fairly decent sized operation. You're seeing less and less of these smaller farms and more of the commercial to be able to keep up with the demand and ever changing technology and expensive equipment. But I was born and raised on a farm. I hated it. I thought it was stupid. And it was so funny. I just had my best friend from nursery school. So we've known each other since we were 4, and she's a vet. Her whole entire life wanted to be a vet. And so we connected for all of, I think it was 18 hours. She was here in Calgary doing a course. And we were laughing that if we ever wanted to have a play date, when we were growing up, we had to work for my dad, like for the farm first. Like dad's like, you're going to go hoe those willow trees, or there's yard work to be done, or like the corral needs to be. And you're like, oh, dad, like, and as much as I like in the moment hated it, now I'm just like, man, I need to run like the farm camp for kids, because it taught me so much about work ethic, about community, about coming together, about like good, strong values. And so I grew up on the farm. I went to the local St. Francis Xavier little community school. And my parents really made education a priority, which was great. And so I decided to go to private school inside the city. I come from a Mennonite background, and I went to grade 7 through 12 into the cities to Westgate Mennonite Collegiate. And I had gotten pretty bullied from grade 4, 5, and 6, and it was pretty severe. So it was also one of the driving factors to bring me to go to school in the city, like change of scenery and kind of try again. And so I was at that school until I was in grade 9, kind of got bullied again, left the school, went to a performing arts school where I got to dance in the afternoons, which I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and like have more of that city vibe. And then got bullied again there. And my brother was at that school, and so it was his last year there. And it was funny. I remember the defining moment. There was a public school, and I was invited to the grad, and then I went to see my brother's grad. And I just remember the difference between the two. And the private school I went to is fairly small, but I remember how involved and how encouraging the teachers were at this private school. And I'm not faulting the public school. I just noticed that difference. And so I decided to go back, and I went back to that private school for my final 2 years of high school. And in that time, the bullying continued. And I think I was navigating a lot of mental health challenges, not knowing what it was. And so in grade 11, I attempted suicide. I had broken my wrist and used prescription painkillers. And so I had a really great upbringing. I had a really involved family, like both sides of my grandparents happily married, come out to the farm. Like we all worked together. I had great brothers. And I think it was just like kind of finding your footing and where you belonged. And I think when you talk about finding your blueprint, there's a lot of things now that I was like, oh, that's why that was so hard, or, oh, that's why my approach didn't make sense. And I shared this story. I was doing a keynote for a teachers convention. And in grade 12, I handed in a project with my name spelled wrong. I spelled it Jessica, Jeessica. And I didn't even notice it until my friends pointed it out. But I just found out I'm dyslexic. And so I mix words up all the time, putting them in the wrong order, struggle with reading, don't have a very good reading comprehension, even though I'm an author and I do quite enjoy books. And so wild to grow up there in Manitoba. I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful province with beautiful people. And I'm really grateful to my mom and dad who have worked really hard as entrepreneurs to give us the life that we had and to have, encouraged me to go pursue my dreams. And my mom always said, you can do absolutely anything. And she always said, you're going to go do great things. And having a cheerleader like that helps you show up really well.
I want to linger a little bit more on your education, your formal education. Is there anything you would change?
Here's what I have looking back at my education and understanding. And it's so funny. I just was listening to a podcast where it says most entrepreneurs are C students. Like you're kind of like average. And here's the crazy thing. So I have two brothers, one older, one younger. And Joe Janzen is an agricultural economist who testifies for the House of Congress. He lives in Illinois. He's a professor at University of Illinois. My brother is freaking smart. You need to know something. The guy is dialed. He would read encyclopedias. Do you remember when your parents, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where you'd have all of the encyclopedias. That's what my brother would read before bed. And I'm dancing around and making up shows and lip syncing to Spice Girls. My dad's turn her down. And my mom's she's going to do the dishes, let her listen to what she wants to listen. This was my childhood. And my brother would just be reading through the encyclopedia. I got pushed through the system. I graduated in grade 12 with a reading level of a grade 5 student. It's not really great, but I was kind and I was polite. And I just did a full psych ed assessment, paid the $4,000, did all the things where you're trying to put puzzles together and read all, it's a crazy thing. And I did it because I was struggling in some areas of my life that I was what's the matter with me? Why am I so stupid? I kept on saying that to myself, whereas some stuff would be so easy for people, but for me, it was such a struggle. And as you start to geek out on brain health and how you show up, that was the catalyst for me being no, I just want to understand. I know I'm not stupid. I know I'm gifted, but my brain was you're stupid. And you're why is it so easy for them? And I'm struggling in this area so much. And especially when you look at my brother and his track record, he had a full ride to Cornell, a full ride to UC Davis. Literally I called him and he's oh, I'm just in Washington. And we're what are you doing in Washington? He's oh, testifying before the House of Congress. You're do you not think you'd want to drop that in the family group chat? It's kind of a big deal. And so then it's me and I'm I don't know, let's have a dance party and have some fun. And so we're just polar opposites. And then there's my little brother, Billy, who is kind and sweet and just a good kid. And so you've got the book smart and brilliant scholarships. Everyone's wow, he was the only one that got 100% on a provincial exam. The only student, I think, in the province. The guy was next level. And then you've got me. And the challenge is I think some of the teachers kind of were confused as to why I wasn't the same as my brother. And then on top of it, I was encouraged, don't pursue in some, not all of the teachers, but hey, we don't really think you're going to need sciences. So don't spend a lot of time here. I mean, it was the same with coaching. Hey, you're not the best. And I wanted to they were doing some early morning practices and I loved volleyball. I actually quite enjoyed it, but I was told by coaches, you know what, I don't think that this is your sport. And it was I was good. I was kind, I was nice. And then they're hey, I don't really think that there's a fit for you here. We don't really need you at the extra early morning practices. I wanted to be there. I think I deserved to be there. And it's crazy how little decisions or things that teachers would say to you would help you determine some of your next steps. And I was just okay, well, I guess that's right. And what has shifted for me is that I think that I thought that there was such a traditional path, and I just kind of got carried along. And now when I look back, I talk to high school students, and I love this message. I was like, what I do now, some of it, yes, was around 25 years ago. Some of it didn't even exist. I get to communicate, raise money, share my message on like having my own reality TV show that's in the palm of your hands that you can watch anywhere, anytime, anywhere in the world. If I would have said to my teachers, hey, just, I'm going to be a movie star. I'm going to have my own little TV show. It's going to be in the palm of your hands. I'm going to produce it, cut it, edit it, show up and share about all my things. People would be like, what you talking about, girl? Because it didn't happen. And so what I am so grateful was that there were some incredible mentors who deeply believed in me. And so if I could go back and change something, all of that being said, is that I wish we would teach students more about brain health. I wish we would teach students more about neuroscience. I wish we would spend more time talking about how to be a good human and like what really matters than about like, hey, this calculus piece, because it's like, people are like, well, it's not like you're going to go around having a calculator in your pocket. And you're like, yes, you are. It is your phone and you can do anything. And now if I need something down, I'm using ChatGPT to be like, help me find the solution of, I'd like to grow my business by 20%. We average this revenue and I need and the world is insane. And I think it's moving so fast that no one needs to be faulted. But if I could go back and change something, I would encourage more students to do more hands-on, more practical work, because it was those moments. We had a big flood in 1996 in Manitoba. And I think it was those moments where students came together and volunteered their time and showed up in community. I think those are the lessons that last, that will have impact, not the calculus lesson. And to the people that are the smart ones that are calculus and are coming up with new chemicals, new ways of, abstracting oil from the earth, new, ways to, have better energy. We need those people. I think we've just designed it kind of in a one narrow lane manner. And there's just so many different approaches to what's needed.
So a big portion of this audience are senior level school administrators. And I think you can give them a very unique perspective as to, given your background and the work you're doing today, which I think a lot of their students would be interested in. What would you suggest to them would be an awesome classroom environment, classroom setup? Like if we can have the Jessica Janzen classroom, so keep in mind all the great things that you're doing. Like, how would you impart that knowledge, or how would you want that classroom to be structured?
It would start with movement and probably some journaling. Like, I think just like all the crazy stuff that you have in your head. It was funny. I was sitting with my therapist yesterday and I was like, you should read my last journal entry. I brought it to my therapist and I read it out. I will not share it here on this podcast because I don't want to go to jail. So, I read this to my therapist and I was like, what's the matter with me? Am I a lunatic? Like literally, I'm like, should I go get locked up in a psych ward? I was like, I have all these crazy thoughts and like, I work really hard for my brain health. She goes, no, Jess, she's like, thoughts are just thoughts. But the reason why you get them out or you journal them or you find a place to let them out is so that they don't keep zipped up inside of you. And when you can unzip them and let them out, they don't stay trapped. And so I would start a class, most likely, if I was a teacher, and like, I just want to say to the educators, to the administrators, I don't envy you. Your job is hard, and to change an entire system, years. But I think if we take small, little, tiny tidbits and we do it consistently, that can change over time. And so I would start with journaling. I would be like, journal. And then I would probably burn it or tear it up, because I don't think people need to read it. I think it's just like, how do we get emotion out of these kids' bodies? I would then go make them do a fitness class with music, because you want to change someone's actual energy of how they show up and get them prepared to learn. Like you're telling kids, and I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but anyone that's ADHD, anyone that is like neurodivergent, and you're asking them to sit in a classroom and not move, and this is the one way we're going to learn. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. Now, you also have to learn that you're going to like play to the learner of my brother Joe, who loves sitting and he could read an encyclopedia for 8 hours. We also like play to the learner of Jess, who like likes the movement. So I would start with journaling. I'd throw it out, burn it. No one needs to read it. I would then go into like movement and music and get people flowing and their bodies right. And like maybe it's a game of dodgeball. Maybe it's a game of tag around the entire school. Then you know what I would do? I would go make the older kids go serve the younger kids.
Mm.
Because people need to learn about service. You want to talk about changing your heart posture. You want to talk about like shifting how people show up. Do some good. Go help somebody. I've never met someone who's helped somebody and been like, well, that was a waste of time. Now I feel like crap. No. So I would get people in acts of service. What can the kindergarten students do? Could they make cards for the old folks home? And could you have a grade 9 student mentoring that right there? Then that's the first half of the morning. We're just doing good. I mean, we've got janitors on strike. I was in my daughter's school. You know who's doing the garbages? The grade 9s, because they can. Why aren't they doing that on a regular basis? This is what you have to do, people. To function in the world, you're going to have to learn how to take out the damn garbage. And students today don't know it because parents are rushing around and we're all trying to keep up busy. And then you can learn about the cool stuff and the calculus and the science, and I would make it way more fun. I would just have more fun in the classroom. I met a teacher yesterday that like a student was struggling. She moved here from Brazil and felt lonely, she lives in Lethbridge. You moved from Brazil to Lethbridge. I mean, if anyone knows about Lethbridge, like I'm not knocking Lethbridge, but it's no Brazil. It's cold. It's windier than you can't even do your hair in Lethbridge. There's no point. Wear a toque, put it in a pony. And so this teacher saw that their student was hurting. You want to know what he did? He built a freaking sandbox in his classroom for her. He goes, I can't take you to Brazil, but I'm going to bring you some sand because I know that that's important to you. I'm going to bring an umbrella and there's a beach chair. We're just going to bring Brazil. What if we filled in more of the gaps like that?
Yeah. You know, I love the passion, Jessica.
Sorry, I'm getting fired up.
Well, I mean, I love it. And I love that you even brought that example up because I've seen these kind of things over and over and over again throughout the country, where teachers go out of their way to do these amazing things. Part of the work that Gina and I are involved in is to more evenly distribute these amazing experiences for folks. So I appreciate that. And I'll clip a good number of those and send those to my kids who will love bringing that to their teachers, saying like, yeah, we need more gym. And then I'll also clip for them that they got to take out the garbage more often because that's kind of bad at my household. And
you got to do it with joy, not begrudgingly.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because the other point I wanted to make is Gina and I have a colleague and a good friend of ours, Gina Cherkowski, who writes all about joy in the classroom and how it is the central experience that should be sought after in the education system. So I'll share that with you. Gina, any questions for Jessica?
Oh my gosh, so many. Just like you're talking and my brain is like, woo, I want to dig into a lot of it. But first of all, we train teachers basically for a typical learner, and our systems are set up for typical learners. We're learning more and more about the brain. We know more about the brain in the last couple of years than we've known in decades, because we can go inside the brain and see actually the functioning behind it. Even our first understanding of dyslexia has actually changed. We used to call it flipping of letters, or that's what we were trained or thought. We actually know there's neural processes that have to do with encoding sounds to symbols that is also part of the dyslexic process. So, and we know dyslexic thinkers are actually brilliant and bright. So one thing I think all students are bright and brilliant. I don't know if school allows everyone to shine yet, but with the new things that we're learning about the way different brains learn and what different students need inside the classroom, I think like you hit it on the head that not everybody's going to need the same thing. And so we need places for everyone to thrive. And that all starts with building community of belonging where everyone feels like they belong, they're welcome, they're valued, and they can do stuff. And I think I love that you talked about emotion really quickly, and then also movement. Understanding our emotions is something that we don't teach enough in schools, and actually it's not even happening enough in our homes. And so the more we can teach emotional regulation and get kids to physically move, the better our brains are apt to learn. We need those things in order for our brains to function well. We need to sleep, we need to eat well, we need to regulate our emotions, and we need to have movement. And that's how our brains are built to thrive. And so we all need that kind of thing. I would love to see that inside classrooms. One of your messages you said once was we have 60,000 thoughts a day and we need to have better quality thoughts. And I just love that. I love that because you talk a lot about choice and deciding to overcome and deciding to be resilient. And you've said before, so what now? Like we can't stop the complexities of the world, the things that are going on around us, but we can stop how we respond to them. We can control some of that. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. And I think if we teach more emotional regulation in school, I think we'll be developing those capacities in kids, but I wanted to know your thoughts.
No, I love that. And I'm so glad that you asked. So I wasn't the smartest. I mean, I have so many things I want to talk about. And I was like, did I take my ADHD meds? So stay focused on the question that they asked you, because my brain's like, boo, 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 boo. So the very first thing that I want to recognize and what I want to share is I speak on joy and I speak on resiliency. And I've had some really hard things happen to me, just like many of the other listeners have had really hard things happen to me. And in grade 11, when I attempted suicide, it was like, I remember the doctor came in and it was like a pat, 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 like, you're going to be okay. He saw that I came from a good home. He saw that I had loving parents. And I don't remember, I've had a few falls. I used to ride horses. I was in 4-H, and maybe there's some brain trauma there. They say that that can lead to your mental health and well-being. I always wore a helmet, but I don't remember a specific thing. But when I think about brain health, I was like, if I had a good life, if all of those things were good, why did I get so many suicidal ideations? Why did I? And when I think about that stat comes out of Stanford, I'm not just making this up. It's a study that Stanford did, and they found that the brain has about 60,000 thoughts. 90% of them are repetitive. But there's these instances that happen in our life, and our brain uses the reticular activating system to look like, is this true or not? So when my brain would say, well, you're a piece of shit, or you're stupid, or you don't fit in, I would then look for the evidence when the girls didn't invite me to, such and such's birthday party. I would look for the evidence and I'd be like, oh, well, you were told like you shouldn't go to early morning volleyball practice. Oh, well, like people are like, oh, you're so crazy, Jessica. Ideas are always out of this world. So my brain just hooked onto that evidence. Now, just as much, I could have looked for the evidence, but I don't know how healthy my brain was. Like, we're in high schools, you're eating sugar, you're eating candy, you're eating red dye. Like, there's all of the things. And I mean, the more I learn, the better I'm doing. And I think we've come such a far way. And it was a quote by Craig Rochelle. He's like a pastor of a big church. He's written a bunch of books on habits and on that kind of brain piece. But it was a quote that stood out for me. He says, if you want a better quality of life, you need better quality thoughts. So then the question begs, how do you get better quality thoughts? 60,000 of them. And lots of us, I remember being like, you've heard the things like, they're always going to be like that. They're never going to change. And now there's like, well, actually, let me share the neuroscience and the data behind how you can change your brain. And then you start geeking out on all of these pieces of like what actually shifts and changes the brain. And so my mom introduced me to Dr. Caroline Leaf. I got to attend a conference that she was at. She has like an app. She's a neuroscientist. She's out of North America. Her research is cutting edge. Then I found out about Dr. Daniel Amen, and he does all these brain scans and he talks about the health of the brain. I eat differently. After I listened to him, he said 25 to 30% of what you fuel into your body just fuels your brain, nothing else. And if I know that I'm somebody that can have deep, dark thoughts, if I'm somebody that can like, oh, well, this is impossible. We're never going to figure this out. Oh, my life is over. And I'm not saying that just flippantly. Those are thoughts that I navigate. How can I help my brain have the best fighting chance? And there's all of these things that we need to do, and not just focus on our mental health. It's about focusing on our brain health, because if you have a healthy brain that is healed and whole, you can access way more easily these powerful thoughts. And so for myself, that's what I wish I had known. And now one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about talking about belief, passionate about talking about, hey, there's a better way to do this, passionate about teaching my kids emotional regulation. Like, I get mad as a parent that my 5-year-old flips his lid when I'm like, no, buddy, like, we're having the dang pork chops. Like, there is no other option for dinner. Like, sorry. And he's like, you're the worst. And we have this one chair that slides really easily in our kitchen, and he just always slams it. And I'm like, how do you not know that we don't like, yeah, well, guess what? You've had 41 years, a lot of freaking therapy, and you've done a lot of research on emotional regulation. And now the honor and the responsibility that I have as a parent is to help teach my kids emotional regulation. And when I was growing up, I thought I was dumb and stupid and I didn't get it. And I think we've pigeonholed people, and thank goodness for smart people who do the research, who are the psychiatrists and psychologists and the doctors, because I think we'll have better language and we can have more patience. And we know that, I mean, Dr. Jodie Carrington, who is so brilliant, said, she's like, I've never met a bad kid. Kids aren't bad. They just need someone to love on them and help them work through their tough emotions. And I was like, wow. And I think I had some tough emotions that I didn't know how to work through, and I don't fault anybody. I'm just so dang glad that I now have the tools to process my own emotions. I know like the safeguards that I need in place. And that's what my hope would be in our education system. It's like, spend less time on calculus and biology and chemistry. Could we spend more time on like emotional regulations and how to be good humans and change the world? Like, I've never seen $3 million, but my charity foundation has raised $3 million because I was just like, I'm going to go do this. And I have the belief that it's possible. And I don't think I would have ever pictured that for my life. And so, what we say, how we say it, what we consume, that stuff matters. And how can we encourage our kids? I mean, I talked to in high school, it was so cool. I got to meet some girls that I spoke in their school 5 years ago. And they said, your talk was still one of my favorites. And I was like, really? Because y'all look like you couldn't give in two shits when I was talking to you. Like, honestly, it was like the toughest audience.
Yeah, that's what it's like talking to every high school group that ever existed.
Yeah, you're like, is anyone here? Or are we all just like doing our own thing?
Again, another shout out to how tough it is to teach high school, right?
Dang.
Those high school teachers.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to hear they remembered it.
Well, that for me, I was like, oh, they were listening. And if they walked out of there with just one tool, one nugget that maybe shifts how they show up, maybe shifts what they go and pursue and do, where someone planted a seed of belief in them. My greatest hope is that the work that I do, and I have a team doing it with me, and it's not possible. If people just think that this is all me, there's millions of amazing women behind me that are keeping me on track and doing all the behind the scenes thing. But if I can help another person access belief and joy, so that they don't waste the day, and so that they can show up and say, you know what, I have no idea how that I'm going to make that happen, but I believe it's possible and I'm going to go do it. Then I know that I'm doing what I need to be doing and living in my calling.
I'll kick it over to Gina because I know she's got a lot of questions, but just quickly, any like really high level tips for, administrators here that listen? They have stressful, busy, long hour jobs. Any like go-to tips you give folks to bring joy in the everyday moments?
If you're burnt out and the shittiest version of yourself, you will just keep getting that. So you cannot serve your teachers, your staff, the admin, the custodians, and your students well if you are a terrible version of yourself. And it starts with taking care of ourselves. And I get it. It is really, really, really hard. But choosing to say, I don't have time, choosing to say like, this is impossible, choosing to say there's just no time in the week, I've got too much on my plate, I'm so overwhelmed, you will continue to get more of that because you're telling your brain what to look for. And then you're finding all the reasons why it won't work. And I'm now at almost 41, the healthiest, best version of myself. And it's been a process. Like it is a process, but it's like in the small little habits that make a difference. At 5 p.m. during COVID, I was reaching for a glass of wine, probably more at like 4:30. And then it was like, oh, well, I don't want to waste this bottle, so I might as well have one more glass and then I'll finish it by tomorrow. Like those were my choices. And I don't think I was the best version of me. And I was in chapters, Indigo, whatever you want to call it now. There's a group of us that we work out on Friday mornings together. And we always do a power question and we gather the teams around. And today's question was, what was one thing that surprised you the most in 30 days, the last 30 days? And a lady was walking by and she goes, are you in a book club? What's happening here? I'm like, oh no, we just work out together. And then we ask each other this one question, encourage each other. And then we take off for the rest of the day. I'm like, you're welcome to join. And her name was Joelle, this beautiful lady, 72 years old, waiting for her car to get fixed. She shared that she's fighting breast cancer. And as we walked out and we finished the questions and the high fives and I pray for people and we do all this stuff, she goes, I just want to tell you, you have the best energy. I said, thank you. I work really hard at it. Like this isn't, I've been accused going onto a flight that I was drunk because I think people think that I'm on something. I was like, let me take the breathalyzer. I'll take the breathalyzer. This is just me. You don't need to see me on alcohol because it's like, that's a whole nother thing. But for administrators, the point I'm trying to make is like, this doesn't just happen. This is me believing that my crazy, wild, chaotic, beautiful, messy self is the best version of me. So I'm not afraid of it. And then I take care of myself. I get enough sleep. I drink the green juices. And not to say that it's not like, I'm not perfect. I'm going to go have ice cream with my kids. We're headed to Florida. I'm going to go to the ice cream store and have some ice cream. I'm going to enjoy some things, but I take really good care of myself because my whole entire world is about bringing my energy and caring for other people around me. And I cannot do that well if I am not the best version of myself. And I sat in a hospital room and I had to have other people. I was in a position where I had to ask for help and people had to help me and I had to receive it. I didn't have to, but I did. And I'm in a position now, I'm in a season in my life where I get to give, I get to show up for others. And I don't want to be a watered down, burnt out, exhausted version of myself. Because if this is all I get, I don't want to waste what I'm gifted. And so I would just encourage people, it feels impossible to do it. Just make one small habit change, one small habit change. Drink one more glass of water. Take one more walk around the school. And what if you just learn to have some more fun? There is stuff that I don't like to do, but I was like, we might as well make it fun if we got to do it. And that's where I would encourage people is just start. Everyone has the same 24 hours in a day. So I get it. It feels impossible because your list looks different than somebody else, but you have to change things if you want to get a different result.
I think that's wonderfully put and very powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Gina?
One of the things you talked about was that you wish schools would teach more students about their own brain. And I know that you just said that you've gone through the process of learning about your own brain. Well, you and I actually talked about neurodiversity on our first time we spoke to each other. And so this is a passion area of mine. And the reason I'm passionate about it is because it's highly connected to mental health. We know that a lot of students that have learning disabilities or ADHD also have a comorbidity with anxiety and or depression. I know that, for example, students who are diagnosed with a math learning disability at a young age often have more adult prescriptions for anxiety and depression. So we can give kids the tools they need to understand their brains when they're little and understand the way their brain is different and what they need to thrive in the language around that. And also teachers, like I say, we aren't there quite yet that we've kept up with the new neuroscience, and that would be really hard to do, but keeping up with the new neuroscience so that we can share that best practice and best learning with our education system would be ideal. But one of the biggest things I think you touched on was in your personal story and your own narrative is you talked about being bullied. Kids now can be bullied 24/7 with social media. And it's the narrative in your head when you have that circular loop that you're just thinking about all the negative things people say to you, and then you start believing them yourself. You look for evidence yourself. And so the research is emerging on self-compassion. If you can have compassion for yourself and stop believing those narratives, and you find that one or two people who believe in you and you start believing them, and you can shift that mindset, I think that's powerful. And from a lot of the stuff that I've seen you do and talk about, it always comes back to that decision and choice to change. And so how did you get that strength, or what was that thing inside you that has always been, this is hard, but I'm going to choose to respond differently? That choice to change, choice to be resilient, choice to rise. You choose to rise is another statement I've heard you say. And I just think that's so powerful.
Oh man, that's a great question. My brain is kind of going through all of the moments. I think, and I'm actually going to share a post. I wrote a book called Bring the Joy, and it originally was a book about my love story with my husband. I married a guy named Hot Ronnie. He's hot. He's amazing. He's hot, but he's not handy. Okay. I can pump him up, but I also keep him baseline where it's wait, don't get too ahead of yourself. He's got a lot of great qualities. However, and then shout out to my handyman, Fraser, who I'd just be like, Fraser, Ronnie can't tackle this and I don't got the time. Can you come? So
does Fraser want to work in Toronto? Because I can go with Fraser over here too.
You know what? Fraser is a gem. He listens to 40s music and you give him the list and all of a sudden you come back 2 hours later and it's all done. And you're like, Fraser, you're amazing. And he is. So God bless. And so the book that I originally started writing was about the love story, because it was all of these moments in time that I had realized, all these nudges that had led me to this very specific time with my husband. And when I moved from Manitoba to Calgary, I did that when I was like 21. I had $300 in my bank account. I remember sitting on my front step, and I talk about this in the book, being like, wow, I don't know a soul here. I knew the girl that I was living with, Carrie, and she had kind of found the house and got it started. And we lived in this random suburbia neighborhood as these young 20 girls. I don't know why we didn't live downtown. I still have like a beef about that, but that's a story for another day. And so I remember sitting on that front porch and I looked out and I was like, I get to be anybody I want to be. Like, nobody knows me. I'm not boxed in. Like, my parents' friends, and bless them all, I've known my parents' friends since I was a baby. Like, the friends, it's like, oh, how long have you known? 45 years, 60 years. Like, these people like that have just been in their lives. It's amazing. And that's one thing, a superpower of Manitoba for sure. And so I remember that being a moment of wow, I could step outside of the box that I put myself in. So that would be the very first thing. Is I think you or other people have put you in a box. And so you just feel like, but this is how I've always done it. So I got to do it this way, or, scared to step out and be maybe a little bit more bold, a little bit more loud. I mean, I don't fault my parents, but my parents were like, stop being so bossy. Stop being so bossy. Just go on a play date. This is what my mom would say. Use your manners and don't be so bossy. You don't always have to get your way. And now I was like, Mom, it's not bossy. I was just confident and assertive. And that's why I'm an entrepreneur and I do what I do. And I mean, it's funny. She wasn't trying to be rude. That was just the language. And she wanted to make sure that I was inclusive and kind. Like, it came from a place of love. But I think there wasn't the language for it. And I look at the book, and the defining moment was being on the front porch and stepping out of that box. And this other defining moment of a perspective shift. And I think when you ask me the question again, Gina, because I want to make sure I land this, and I think I'm going in the right direction, but I want to make sure I get there.
Just how did you develop, like, is there an inner thing that developed strength in you to just sort of, when things were tough, you always make the choice to rise or choice to overcome? And that's big in your messaging. And so
that's where, okay, now you're going to help me land this plane. Thank you. I also just took my meds. So hopefully the wires are connecting a little bit stronger and faster. So the choice was, I remember stepping outside of the box and just like not feeling like there was only one way to do it. That would be one of the things. And the next moment of this defining thing about like learning to rise was, we had just gotten my son's diagnosis and we're in the hospital and they deliver this news. We're really sorry. My second child, born 13 months after our first, when we were told by doctors, hey, I don't think you're going to be able to have kids. So you're kind of like, whoa, life's crazy. And nothing we felt was wrong until 2 months. And then a series of tests and a bunch of things happened that led us to this moment when a doctor walked in and said, Jessica, Ronnie, I'm really sorry, but your son Lewiston has spinal muscular atrophy, SMA type 1, and it's 2016. There's no treatment, no cure, nothing we can do. We don't believe he'll make his first birthday. And our role in his care will just be to keep him comfortable until he passes, because we can't do anything. There is nothing we can do except for comfort. And I mean, if you're a parent on here, and honestly, if people wonder why we'll talk to a stranger or why I'm so big and bold and I don't hold back and I just say what's on my mind, it's because of that moment. A moment where you are faced with, like, will you just throw in the towel and just coast in? Or like, will you make it count? And so for me, it's like, I waited for death to stare at me dead in the face to really go, wow, like if this is all we got to make it count. And I think we wait until it gets to that point where you're like, oh man, like Tim McGraw writes the song, like, live like you're dying. And I think we just think that there's going to be more time. I think that, we'll get to it one day, someday. And it's like, well, maybe someday is today. Matthew Dix, who's an incredible educator, who's really brilliant, who I share his work, and I can't highly recommend him enough, changing education, doing things differently. He wrote a book called Someday is Today. And that was the shift for me. It's like, we can't wait. This can't be like, okay, we'll have a dance party when he's better. Like, imagine if we're just like, oh, I'm going to do the thing that I want to do when I have all the money in the bank account. I'm going to share my dream when I'm a little bit more confident. Like, you just have to step into it. And the perspective for me was, if I was lying in a hospital bed, like my son was, and I couldn't talk and I couldn't move, how would I want it to feel? I was like, oh, man, like that's what's in my control. And so I used to use this quote. It goes, event plus your reaction equals your outcome. And the more work I do on emotional regulation is like, I have some pretty horrible reactions. I do. I actually think it's event plus your response, because you can have a bad reaction. You can get mad. You can throw stuff. My girlfriends like got me a box of ugly dishes that they got for their weddings. And I got to just smash it on a fence in the middle of nowhere and break stuff. Like, not the greatest, healthiest reaction. However, my response to what happened to my son, my response to his diagnosis, and yes, he did pass away just shy of his 6-month birthday. My response is joy. I still react and I'm still mad and angry. I'm sit in anguish and sorrow, but I don't stay there. And so I would just encourage someone, if you are in darkness and if you are in a season of struggle, it's like, okay, this is it. There's a radical acceptance piece of radically accepting where you're at. And it's like, can't change it. It is what it is, but you can change the outcome. And that way you change the outcome is by changing your response. And I just wanted a better outcome for my son. And so I would just say, like, there's people looking up to you. We need you. So if you are stuck, stop telling yourself a story that doesn't serve you. And if you are stuck in the depths of despair, get around people who can help pull you out. And it's probably the people that you least expect. It might not be your mom. It might not be your best friend. It might be the girl in the back row at your fitness class. It might be your fitness instructor. It might be the lady in the coffee shop. I don't know, but you got to get around good people who have healthy brains to help you get your brain healthy.
Do you have any suggestions? I mean, the other part of this audience is parents as well. I know that overlaps with obviously a lot of the folks that you work with and for and educate. You have any suggestions for them as to how to incrementally build more resilient children, support more resilient oriented children, if I can phrase it that way?
Totally. I mean, oh gosh, I wish I was an expert, and my husband is the better parent. Okay. I'm claiming that publicly. He is the better parent. So ask him for parenting advice. He's a legend. My husband walks in the door, nothing from his work day gets in the way. Present, phone down, playing mini sticks. He'll watch my daughter do a 45-minute show. I'm tapped in for 5. And by the minute 6, I was like, girl, we got to wrap it up. Next project. So one, I just want to qualify that statement with that. And I also just want to say, it's okay that you might be not the best parent, but I am bringing my best, and there's small little things. One thing that I am really struggling with, and I think that you can do right away, is get off fucking phone. Like, bleep that part out. But I, for Lent, gave up being on my phone at 8 p.m. I'm now moving it to 7. But good golly, I'm actually present. I'm not wasting time. And my business is on my phone. I can't give it up. My business is on my phone. So I can be on my phone, but I can't be on social media. And I'm like scrolling and I'm like, well, I'm doing research. Oh, I'm looking for no, I'm wasting my dang time. So be present is the very first thing. And something really practically that I do with my kids, because it has made a significant difference. And I want to teach my kids about looking for the evidence. I want to teach my kids about gratitude, because if you have a hard heart, if you're struggling and you're mad and you're angry, you can't be mad and angry when you're grateful. You can't be mad and angry when you've got evidence that good things, even if they're small, happened. So the 2 questions that I ask my kids before bed, and I don't tuck them in every night. I'm on the road. I'm gone a lot. But the questions that when I do get the privilege and the opportunity to tuck them in are, tell me what worked today, and tell me 3 things you're grateful for. And that comes from, I wish I could claim it as my own because it's brilliant. It's Dr. Daniel Amen. This book here, it's called Change Your Brain Every Day. You read a page. It's game changer. I know you're going to let me recommend some books that have really helped me, but that's one of them. Follow his work, consume his content. I take his dang vitamins. I'm not an ambassador. I'm just saying they work, and I'm living proof of it. But ask your kids, tell me what worked today. Because you can go to bed and you can focus on all of the crap. Oh, I got left out of this. I wasn't included on that. My teacher yelled at me for this. But if you can help your kids that when we're resting, and often our brains, especially an ADHD brain, is having a hard time shut down, how can you help them access those powerful, good quality thoughts? Tell me what worked today. Oh, well, I actually got to be star of the day because I was the helper and I used my manners, or whatever it is. Hey, tell me what else. And if they don't know, you can help them. That's our role as parents, as caregivers. Imagine if teachers spent the last 15 minutes saying to their students, hey, let's talk about what worked today. Hey, tell me what worked. And everyone's like, oh man, I love Mr. Rogers when you did that funny thing. And like, you know what I mean? Like, what if we did more of that? Like, what if we literally are helping our kids connect the new neural pathways of like, here's what worked. Here's some powerful thoughts. And I just think it's such an easy place to start. It doesn't cost money. It just takes a little bit of time. Put your phone down and go ask your kids those questions. I don't want a hard heart. And I always say gratitude changes the posture of your heart. You have a good posture of your heart. You'll have a good posture of your head. You have those two things in line, you can change the world.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So if I could ask you to, let me phrase it this way. If I gave you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, you can reform the entire education system, public education, has to be public education system, in any way you want, what are some of the big things you would do?
I think I already talked about it. I think I would start the morning with like mindfulness and dance parties and movement and like get kids involved in becoming part of the process. I think it would be about teaching kids about neural pathways and how they can plant new neural pathways. Like, what? My dad's a farmer. Like, I've watched stuff be planted in spring and grow throughout and harvested in summer. I am reaping the harvest of powerful seeds that I've planted in my brain to help me do good, to help me show up, to help me not stay in the depths of despair and darkness. So it would be that very formula where it's like students come in, you can journal. Maybe they had a tough night. Maybe their parents, maybe they didn't get enough food. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they got left out. Maybe they had a tough practice. I don't know what it is. I would then burn those up. I wouldn't let people read them, but I just let them unzip those feelings and get them out. And then I would move in this movement piece. And where is the dang joy? And what happens, you want to talk about companies that are doing cool things, companies that are changing the world. It's companies that aren't so rigid and this is how we do. And you have to show up from 8 to 5. They're, incorporating joy as a practice as they work. And I know when I get stressed out, overwhelmed, it's like, okay, put on some music. Man, I'm just going to rock out. And I think if you can incorporate those things, that would be the one thing. And I don't just want to limit it to public, private, at home, homeschooling, you know it. Do those things. I know the days that I do them, I show up a heck of a lot better. And guess what? The teachers can do it while they're doing it with the students because they've got so much on their dang plate and so many demands. What if we just gave everybody 30 minutes of freaking grace to just get settled? But it's like, do all this stuff and half the stuff doesn't even make sense. And I'm not trying to fault the administrators, but I'm just like, what? That's what we're focused on? That's the thing. My daughter's classroom has 32 kids. And you want to know what? 26 of those are boys. There's not a lot getting done in that classroom, but let's teach them about emotional regulation and help get all the jitters out for the boys that got ants in their pants. They're not bad kids. They just need to get ants out of their pants.
I've got a few more questions. By the way, I agree with all of that. I mean, first and foremost, movement is so necessary. And I've actually got an upcoming podcast with a specialist in what movement does to the brain. But,
Jason, can I give one beef? Because maybe someone can answer this question. Because I'm going to come here's my thing. I never want to be a person of judgment. I want to be a lens of curiosity. I was curious about some cell phone stuff. And I was like, rather than blasting the cell phone companies, like, can someone help me understand? Like, I just want to, when I was growing up, it didn't matter what the freaking temperature was. We sent kids outside. And now we have become... We are now sissies. I'm sorry. No kid is freezing in -19. No kid. And if they are, like, tell me and I'll send them a scarf. But there is something in the lost and found that can bundle up those kids. But I do not get why we are not sending kids outside because A, the teachers need a moment for themselves to self-regulate, for them to get emotional regulation and get out of the box. And B, it's like no one's freezing to death. They're being monitored. No one is freezing. Send them outside. If it's -35, dress warmer. I don't care, but like send them outside.
I think that comes from a place of love. Parents want to make sure their kids are comfortable the entire time, but at the same time, to the piece about building resilience, I think it's extraordinarily important that kids get outside. Like here, they don't go out in the rain. If in Vancouver they didn't go out in the rain, they would never go out. So kids go out in the rain all the time and they come prepared. So that's always the example I give folks around here that, there's plenty of plenty of resilient kids that go out. For you, it's minus 19 here. If it's colder than minus 15, they won't go outside. So that's right. So that's the example I give them is like, what do you think they do in Alberta? They go outside when it's colder. Gina, I've got a couple more questions. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, just really quickly. I really want to hammer that point home. Like, in order for the brain to be in a place for optimal learning, it has to be well. We have to be well to learn well and to live well. And all of what you're talking about is like regulating our mind body so that we can learn well. And then, of course, I love the message to bring the joy, because we learn better when we are excited, and it helps us get engaged. So I just really wanted that speaks to me, and I'm so excited you'll be talking more about it at the Mental Health Summit.
I can't wait. And you know what? I was like, I ain't holding nothing back. Like, buckle up, audience, because I am fired up about this topic.
Awesome.
Couple more questions before we let you go, Jessica. When you look out into, and you travel the world and you meet people of all kinds of different backgrounds and persuasions, what worries you? What keeps you up at night?
Not much, because I'm a really good sleeper.
Okay, I can ask the flip side to that question. What are you hopeful for?
I'm hopeful that people don't have to suffer in darkness and stay in the darkness. I'm hopeful that people can find the light because of smart people that do need chemistry and biology and are studying their brain and are, the geeks, you want to call them that. I love the geeks because they're helping. And it's like you bring someone that's like got the book smarts, and then you can pair them with a person like me who can maybe make it a little bit more consumable and easy to understand. And so I joke because I am a really good sleeper. And for that, knock on wood, I'm really grateful because I have a peace that I believe can only be accessed through my faith, just of like the goodness and grace of God. That's a whole nother topic in conversation, but I would be lying if I didn't say the reason why I think I can have so much of that is because of a peace and a hope in heaven. Because I faced death, I faced the hard things, and that gives me the peace of just like, you're going to be okay and you can keep going. And I think a lot of people wrestle with that. So because of my high death mortality awareness, that for me is what keeps me fueling forward. And then what I'm most hopeful for is that I believe we can see even more goodness come, even more peace come, because we can give, teach, educate, and create the awareness for others to not be in darkness and to gain the tools to find the freedom for their forward momentum, for their journey and joy. I heard this. It's like, once you make peace that life is about problem solving, you can enjoy it a whole lot more. And I think we resist the hard things. We get angry when it happens. Like, why is this happening? And we want to rationalize the why. And Gina, mentioned that the formula and the framework I use is not sitting in the why is this happening? Why are the tariffs happening? Why is the political landscape? Like, there's a lot to it. And I'm not going to pretend to know it. I don't even watch the news. I don't turn it on. It's not good for my mental health. If I need to know about it, eventually I will find out about it. But this piece of not the why, but my question is, so now what? Tough thing happened, tough day at the office, tough conversation, got a hard piece of news delivered to you, death, diagnosis, marriage falling apart, finances, mental health, relationships, your kid is running you up the tree, one side and down the other. What's your so now what? That's what you're in control of. And I think because it's like, I know so well, I'm going to control what I can control. I gotta let go of the rest that has served me well. And sometimes I react and freak out, but then I can quickly jump into this place of, okay, it is what it is. We're going to let it be.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to land the ship. But if I could ask you always the last question, what is a book, movie, podcast, album that you would recommend to the audience?
Obviously, I'm going to recommend my book because it's so good. And I need more book sales because I need a publisher for my next book. Otherwise, I'm slinging it out of my garage and doing a Kickstarter. So I'm going to shamelessly plug it. So be prepared, people. It's good. Bring the joy. This is a book I wrote, and it's like a memoir style. The next book is all about a lot of the practicals that I talk about with some research involved. So I can't wait for that. I mentioned it, but anything by Dr. Daniel Amen. He is a psychiatrist and has done the most amount of brain scans. Highly recommend his work. I think if you're an educator and you just want to be encouraged, this book, Sticky Notes by Matthew, I can't say his last name, a phenomenal teacher that is changing the world one story at a time. Follow him on social media. If you're an educator, I would book him for your teacher's conference. He's taking bookings, and you're going to say, I wish I would have booked him when Jessica had mentioned, because now he's booking up until 2028. That is what's going to happen. This man, I haven't heard him speak, but I follow him on social media. I'm not an educator, and I'm like, wow, my day is better because of him. And the other book that I forgot to mention, which I wanted to pull out, was this book is by Dr. Daniel Amen, Raising Mentally Strong Kids, How to Combine Neuroscience, Love, and Logic to Grow Confident, Kind, Responsible, Resilient Kids. I mean, if you saw the stack of books and the things, this one, My Magic, Neuroscience and Manifesting, and how it's like, I got a whole list. We're trying to put it up on the website because it's a question I get asked often. But what I will say is, rather than just like one single book, because different things will speak to different people, is if I could offer your audience this, be aware of what you are consuming into your body, like from food wise, mentally, what are you listening to, reading to, whose energy are you surrounding yourself with? Because if you want to see change, it starts there.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Well, and this is meant to be just an appetizer to the main event at the Mental Health Conference in Banff in April. So anyone that's loved this podcast can hear more of you then. Thanks for your time, Jessica.
And Jessica's going to participate in the Chapters and Cheers event. So you actually get to talk to her, get your book signed, and have some time to have a conversation with her.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. That's my favorite part, is the connection piece of like connecting with great people. So Jason and Gina, thank you for having me, allowing and welcoming me with all my crazy energy, and for holding space for it. I don't take it for granted. And anytime I get to share my story and what I'm passionate about, I am filled with gratitude, because the hard things are being used to do good things. And that's super cool.
This podcast is recorded on the territory and Treaty 13 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. The show is edited and produced by the marvelous and talented Andrew Mastroianni. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, remember, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate what's happening. I'm your host, Jason Buccheri. Until next time.